I'm a former UK undercover police officer, AMA. Yep. I was dealing with a drug dealer who was such a nice bloke. And honestly, I would have gone for a beer with him under other circumstances. It was his day to be arrested. And he gave me my crack and heroin. I gave him my cash. And he said, "Chris, I really like you, man. I really get in with you. But can you just tell me one thing?" "Sure," I said. "You're not an undercover policeman, are you? Because if you are, you legally have to tell me." "Nah. Of course not, mate." Seconds later he had been pinned on the floor and handcuffed by the arrest team. And it made me feel quite sad. In fact, it's an urban myth, obviously, as some previous subreddits have pointed out. Did you ever encounter any crooked cops or people in positions of power whilst you were undercover? If you did. Crooked cops. A few. Yes. And they get investigated with a thoroughness you wouldn't believe. Even when it is nothing to do with the current case. What was the most difficult thing you had to do to maintain your cover whilst bored at the beginning of a long-term Drew Gus operation? I decided to adopt a faux Russian accent. The job lasted for many months. And I found it somewhat exhausting to keep that up. Some drug dealers also thought it was a piss take. And it led to several comical arguments in CD council estate stairwells. Probably most difficult thing was pretending to be a pedophile. And being enthusiastic and discussing some of the most abhorrent things humanly possible. What's your view on police having a relationship with someone using their undercover identity? It's wrong. And I have been very clear about this in previous dealings with the media. I don't approve of it. And a professional operator should not need to shag someone to maintain their cover. And certainly not with the tacit approval of superiors. However, when you expect someone to go undercover with a small group for 7 years, it is human instinct to form relationships. So I can maybe understand how it has happened in the past. I don't condone it. But I might understand it under certain circumstances. This is all being covered by the Pitchford inquiry in the UK. Which I am sure will doubtless reveal some of the more interesting questions about this activity. Most creative excuse you received when making an arrest? As an undercover officer, I would never have been involved in arresting anyone. The targets would only ever know of my involvement when necessary. And sometimes it would be revealed during tactical interviewing. So for example, I went for the down and out look. With faux suppurating leg ulcers and a pervasive odor of urine. Exchanging money for Drew Gus, etc. They were asked in interview what was going on. And they all stated that I was a well-known local homeless itinerant. And they were good Christians. So were giving me money and food. That, unfortunately, was the nail in theory coffin. Because then it is revealed who I really am. And the evidence is laid out, video. Chain of custody of the Drew Gus I was sold. DNA etc. And they have no choice but to plead guilty. What is your most interesting or disturbing case? Disturbing for me? Probably anything dealing with pedophilia. Once case involved making a call to a suspected child abuser who had been identified online. The idea was that I would give him a quick call for no other reason than to arrange potentially some sort of meeting in the future. I expected to be on the phone with him for 5 minutes. And for him to be ultra suspicious. And actually for the call not to yield anything other than a possible agreement to call again later. I was totally taken aback when the call ended up lasting around 45 minutes. With this guy describing, in rather sickening detail, the activities he wanted to engage in with my fictional children. In fact, I had to end the call myself. It was a conversation which I find disturbing to this day. To maintain my cover, I had several more conversations of that ilk with the guy. And eventually met him in person. But just because the urban cop myth states that a pedophile can always recognize another pedophile. And I was anxious that he would simply dismiss me in person for that reason. Evidently. All in all, a really quite disturbing episode which haunts me every now and then. And ending up with habits. How true is this and how deep does an officer have to go? true in us and probably other countries. It may happen in the UK, but only under very extreme and justifiable circumstances. With all that time spent undercover, infiltrating gangs and arresting criminals, how much do you worry about being recognized by former associates? What do you think you'd do if you were recognized? Thanks for the AMA. I don't worry about it consciously, but I take these weird subconscious precautions. Like I travel different routes to work, and I actively avoid particular areas. Or try to. I'm lucky because I worked in London. And London is huge. Anonymity is guaranteed. Also, I have been in the public eye. And I left the police several years ago. So I think if anyone wanted to get me, they would have done so by now. If I was recognized in the street now, I would just deny it. But I wouldn't relish it at all. Do your friends and family know you're working undercover? Working must be super stressful for you. Do you suffer psychologically during the who time? My close friends did, certainly those in the police. My immediate family did, except my mum. Although she does now. It was stressful. And I ended up leaving the police. But a lot of that was down to me not managing my stress effectively. And the simple fact is, whilst stress affects people in different ways, I did not manage it effectively. And I am still tarnished by it now. I'm still getting over it, to be honest. And it takes time. It's weird because at the time, you have no idea of the effects it is having. And it's only in the past 2 years or so I have been able to realize I didn't realize I acted this way or acted to such things. How did you deal with the emotional strain of undercover work while you were undercover? And how have you dealt with it since? Has it affected you much in the years since you left? Thank you so much for doing such a fascinating AMA. It's definitely one of the best I've seen. Thank you for the comments. You would usually just carry on until it was finished. I think I still deal with the fallout now. I think I am affected in a subconscious level. In ways that I act and react to things. I am overly suspicious. And often paranoid. And I do little things like change my routes to work often. Or arrive for meetings 15 minutes early to scope the place out, like meetings in public places. Not in offices or anything. What's your most satisfying arrest or good result on something you were working on? Also, what areas of London were the main spots for organized criminal activity? Best result operating undercover was any job where I bought a gun. Or snared a child abuser. Islington and some part of southeast London for old school London baddies. Tottenham. Hackney for badass youth and Turkish gangs etc. But also places like Chelsea. Kensington etc. house some of the biggest baddies of all. Bankers. Fixers. Oligarchs etc. I'm an East Londoner myself. What are your views about crime in East London? Do you feel it has increased, decreased, or just changed in its nature? Crime is always there. And always will be. People will always want to make a quick buck under the counter. As it were. I think it has just changed in nature. We are seeing a lot more cybercrime nowadays. And a lot less traditional crime like armed robberies. Street crime and mugging and such like. I think you're a lot less likely to get robbed in the street like that now. How often does it happen that the police gets infiltrated itself? I don't know. But it's not a great prospect. Having to spend the first 2 years dealing with the worst jobs and making tea for a bitter, sour-face old curmudgeon of a sergeant. For 19k a year. There are more likely, and indeed certainly are, officers who have been recruited after joining to provide info to criminal gangs. This is happily very rare though. And such activity will often be noticed before it has a huge effect. Honestly? A bit trite, but it ducks you up. Not just not being able to tell them about stuff, but just the concept that you are striving to put away bad people. And it means that you inevitably sacrifice part of your life, at the time just temporarily. But as it turns out, it affects you forever. And yes, you have to be strong in many respects. Even turning your nose up at moral questions, I wasn't strong enough. Hence my departure from the police. When undercover, did you ever partake in substances? Kind of a do a line with me to prove you're legit kind of thing? Also, while undercover, did you live at home and keep a regular life during the times? What would you say if things like occupation, hobbies, usual small talk bullshit would come up? Or did you have to make personality changes while working? And if so, have any of those changes stuck with you today? If I didn't know you, then I may affect some mannerisms I might not usually have. Just whilst I scoped you out. My actions and demeanor whilst undercover is not anything like the real me, I have to say. Closest I get is sometimes when I get angry about something. I have this weird switch which flicks into Cockney gangster mode, but it only lasts for a second. And I realize I am acting like a buffoon. I never did any deer whilst undercover. And had plenty of reasons not to. None of which were ever questioned by the baddies. Yes. I would live at home, my real home, when doing undercover work. But cops generally keep close counsel. And that means often associating only with other cops. So it was easy to be in social scenarios. Did you often have to wear prosthetics and wigs to change your look? Any unexpected benefits of being good at lying? None. In fact, quite the contrary, not many people trust you. How do police TV shows and movies compare to reality? Very little in my experience. Whether it's bog standard policing or doing the sexier stuff. The work is 95% bureaucracy, boredom and dullness, with 5% sheer excitement and adrenaline. I think I miss the 5%. And I think it's that 5% which keeps people doing the job. It's almost cliched thing to say. But obviously if TV movies were an accurate reflection, then there would be no cop shows committed to film. Ever. Hello. Thanks for doing this, Emma. I have the following question. If, while undercover, someone from the gang orders you to kill someone, what do you do? What happens if there is no way around it? Well, the easiest way around it is to say no. I can't see a situation where you couldn't get out of it. Unless you yourself are at the end of a loaded gun. And if you are in that situation, then you have done something erroneous somewhere along the line. All the stuff you do is meticulously monitored and analyzed. Plans are in place for every conceivable opportunity or event. If you were ever to be in such a situation, there would be a plan to get you out. And if necessary, compromise the operation. Not asking how much, but is the salary good? The salary is dependent upon your length of service and rank, and is no different to the salary of a regular cop. The salary scales for the Met Police are published in their website. When I left in 2011, I was paid around £36,000 a year. Do you guys yell quit resisting while flogging the subdued suspect over there? Yes. Although I'm not sure flogging is the appropriate term. We prefer utilization of Home Office approved techniques. Are you still in any sort of danger from your undercover work? I mean, now you are going public by writing a book and doing this AMA with your picture as proof. I could imagine guys you've put away, or their henchmen, being set on revenge. Not really. I wrote the book nearly 5 years ago. Plus it's Sunday and I wanted something to do. I do certain things in my daily life to make me feel a bit more secure and safe. But danger is overrated. Has anyone ever seen under your cover? What happened? Very few have. And what happened is strictly classified. Do you believe you made a difference and that all the trouble you went through was worth it? I made a difference to people individually. Yes. Across 16 years service. I know that I positively affected some people's lives for the better. But if you are asking, do I think I made a difference in the grand scheme of things in the criminal world? Then no. Not really. And was it worth it? Well, it was for those individual people. Yes. And it was for me. As a rewarding and enriching learning experience. Saw that 50M of Drew Gus washed up the other day. If say I was to find it, how easy would it be to get rid for a profit? Take it, most dealers know each other, so would be found of pretty quick. If you found that amount and were flat broke, what would you do? Thanks for TMA. We'll look into the book. If I were flat broke. Not a bad idea. I too would tell the police about the £45 million of Drew Gus that had suddenly appeared.